But, guys, if you listen to Kevin Hassett, who's the director of the National Economic Council, he says that the things that are being done by the Trump administration right now, they are going to be leading us into a golden age. Brian, I want to get your opinion after taking a listen to what he had to say.
All the new stuff that's so important for workers, no tax on Social Security, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. All of those things are going to be producing more labor in the U.S. Labor is about 70% of value added in the U.S., so you get an explosion of labor supply. Think what's going to happen to output. It's a golden age, and again, with all that supply, you don't have inflation. It's increased demand from government spending that causes inflation, not increased supply.
So, Brian, you hear there's a lot of concern going on right now. What are the negative consequences, or what are the consequences of these tariffs going to be? But if you look at it from this different standpoint, do you think that we are going to see this explosion of the labor supply?
Well, there's two sides to this tariff coin. Let's talk about both of those sides, okay? The one side is the tariffs, the auto tariffs that are going to go into effect. And 25% is a big tariff. The goal there, obviously, is to shift more manufacturing to the United States. Kevin Hassett said in that same interview, when I was graduating from high school in 1985, about 97% of cars that we drove in America were made in America. There's a vision of that. That's one side of the coin, okay? Get manufacturing here. The other side is what he just mentioned now, which is you've got to do things to encourage manufacturing to come here so that we build out the facilities, build the factories, invest in the equipment. That's the tax cut and the regulatory story. Now, we've heard a ton about the tariff story, and the opponents of President Trump want to tell that story. You heard Mark Warner saying it's a huge tax increase. What they don't want to talk about is the other side of the coin, the tax cuts, the deregulation that makes us more productive and encourages investment. And those two things work hand in hand. Peter Navarro said something really interesting. He said, tariffs are a tax cut, okay? Now, strictly speaking, they're not. They're a tax increase. But they're a tax increase on importers. And what he's saying there is if you increase those taxes, it gives you room to cut taxes on Americans. So you put the whole thing together. You've got a plan to bring manufacturing to America, lower taxes on workers in America and investors in America. And the theory is that formula gives you an economic boom in America. Now, only time will tell, but it's not an unproven formula.
Let me make it simple for you, too.
Well, hold on. But one thing that is concerning here is, though, because the U.S. auto industry had a decline, started declining in the 1970s. You started with NAFTA and the manufacturing going across our borders.
Bingo.
But so now we're going to have this labor supply, and we are going to see more manufacturing here. But can the U.S. auto industry, in its existing form, can it actually handle the capacity?
The truth is we're right around 65% of capacity in many of the larger facilities. But no, that's the short answer. We're going to have to build out. But I think you really nailed it when you said this is about encouraging production here, encouraging consumption here. And I'll just make it simple. You can buy a Tahoe, a really nice Tahoe, or you can buy a Range Rover. Now, the Range Rover is going to be 25% more expensive. It's built overseas. Or you can buy a really nice Tahoe that's made here in America. The idea is make them here. You don't have to worry about the tax and make the taxes or tariffs even, and then there's no tax.
But do you know what's interesting, too, Lisa, and this maybe is like a little bit less serious, but the people who are going to be hit the hardest with these tariffs are those who are buying these foreign cars that tend to be more expensive, your luxury cars, and these are the people who probably could afford to pay a little bit more for their cars.
Look, I mean, President Trump won states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, both in 2016 and again in 2024, with this message, the message to the working class of wanting to bring jobs back to the United States. Exactly. And so, look, he made two big promises on the campaign trail. He said, one, I'm going to bring those manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Two, I'm going to reduce prices and the cost of goods in America. And so if he can achieve both of those goals, especially prior to the midterm, it's a success. If he does not, then, ultimately it will be a failure. And then also, when you look at some of these different countries like Mexico or Canada, they're totally dependent on the United States for trade. I mean, we could crash their economies with some of these tariffs, send them into a recession. So even if you go back to President Trump's art of the deal, what does he talk about? What does he advocate for? Things like having leverage points. Tariffs gives you that. And then also to go to the extremes, to put out, something that's so far out there that then you're able to maneuver and push your, the other side into a more reasonable standpoint, a more reasonable point of agreement. And so perhaps, at least with those two countries, that'll achieve these goals. He's also asked for, concessions with immigration. Some of those things he has already won. So look, we'll see where this goes. I think it's a TBD.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, President Trump, he's using tariffs not just for the economy. He's using them to try to end the war in Ukraine. The president told NBC News yesterday he's, quote, pissed off with Putin for undermining Ukrainian President Zelensky's credibility, and that he won't hesitate to issue tariffs on Russia if they won't sign a ceasefire deal. He's threatening similar economic sanctions on Iran, telling the world's #1 state sponsor of terror that if they don't make a nuclear deal with the United States, there will be bombing, and he will impose even more tariffs from 4 years ago. You know, Lisa, I want to come back to you on this one because it feels like President Trump is already having to play catch up. For the last 4 years, President Biden has decided not to impose the tariffs that were already on Iran, and Iran has grown into this superpower, getting a lot of money, and all of a sudden now they are backing Houthis even more. The Houthis have done direct attacks on Israel, the first time under this regime in like 45 years. But at this point, do they have too much power? Has Iran gotten so big that these tariffs, are they going to have the same effect now as they did during the first term?
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw with the Biden administration, what did Joe Biden do? He unfroze billions of dollars right before the October 7th terror attacks, and then also told Congress on September 11th, which I still can't wrap my head around why it's so anti-American to do that. And look, the Trump administration, the first time around, they had the maximum pressure campaign. It worked. Their whole point was to choke off that oil revenue with Iran, and it was successful. And they've announced, again, look, we're back to maximum pressure. And then he also did things like take out Qasem Soleimani to put them on their feet and to let them know that, you know, we mean business. So yeah, I think that he will be able to push Iran back to a point of weakness. But how long does that take? And then what happens, you know, in 2028, dependent on who's the next president.
What else has happened in the last 4 years? Now, all of a sudden, China is the one who is buying most of the oil from Iran.
Right.
So we are not in the same position as we were 4 years ago. Unfortunately, Joe Biden's administration just allowed that to happen.
Well, that's why he's talking about these secondary tariffs. I hate to bring up tariffs again. I know everybody really wants
We're trying to move on,
No,
Brian.
because it's President Trump's favorite word.
It is his favorite
or one of his
word.
favorite words.
So what he's saying, and he's already done this with Venezuela, what he's saying is, if you buy oil from these guys, I'm going to put a tariff on you, Lisa. Okay, that's what a secondary tariff is. So he's saying that with Iran. He's saying that with Russia. And look, that's hitting them right where it hurts. I mean, that's how they make money. So I think it's a fascinating way to do this. I don't know how easy it is to enforce. I think that's the question mark. But he really is going beyond the maximum pressure we saw in his first term. And he knows his leverage point. It's money, it's oil, and it's tariffs.
Can I just quickly, for the record, say I'm not buying oil from Russia? Or
Yeah, that was a hypothetical.
I just wanted to make sure.
Total hypothetical.
Yeah.
Kevin, where
Lisa, how dare you?
where do you see this taking us? You're seeing the strikes in Yemen, and now with the threats of the tariff. What is this going to do to the Middle East?
A couple of things. I don't think people really understand the absolute danger here. The DNI, Tulsi Gabbard talks about this, and you're on the precipice of some major conflict in the region if Iran does not play ball. I think the leverage point here, and I think you touched on it earlier, if the president really just goes out and says anyone who does business with Iran has no access to the American marketplace, that's effective. It's been effective in the past. And I think ultimately what will happen is the mullahs in Iran will try to work out a soft deal that's underground, sort of below the radar, because they have a domestic audience too. And I think it's in their best interest, because if they don't, bombing is a real possibility, and I think people are underestimating the resolve of this White House.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.